Please be seated. Wow, I feel high and lifted up here. Yeah. For those who don't know me, again, my name is Father Skip Walker. I am priest in charge right around the corner. I'm also coordinator of ministries with people of African descent for this diocese. And I'm glad to be here. I've been here before where I did a jazz program along with Jenny. Where's Jenny? Okay, Jenny, all right. And we did a program here last, I think it was, year before last. So glad to be here as a preacher. This is my first time worshiping with you, so I'm really glad to be here. Also, again, next Sunday here at your church, 4 p.m., Bishop Skirvin will be here. We're doing a jazz Eucharist. Some people might say, well, what does jazz have to do with the Episcopal Church, or what does jazz have to do with Christian worship? And the answer is everything. So come on out at 4 p.m. It'll be great. I'll have jazz musicians here. We'll be playing and celebrating Absalom Jones, who was the first African-American priest to be ordained in the Episcopal Church. His story is a great story. His story is one that brings people together, which is so important at a time when all we hear about is division, division, division. Great story about bringing all people together, so please come out. As I think about the gospel reading that you just heard, wonderful story, as I thought about it, I thought about how frustrating it is in life when you work really hard at something and you don't get the results that you're looking for. Anybody been there before? You work really hard at something. As a jazz musician, I get a taste of that a lot. When I go in the practice room and I practice something over and over and over again, and I think I've mastered it, only to get in front of people, in front of an audience, and I bomb, I fail, right? It was happening so much one time that I went to an old jazz musician who was known for giving words of wisdom to younger jazz musicians. I went to him, I said, man, no matter how much I practice, no matter how much I work, no matter how hard I work, I still keep making all these mistakes. So I'm thinking he's going to give me some really great, wise advice, like a sage. And he simply sat back in his chair and he looked at me, he said, well, if that's happening a lot, it just really means that you're not practicing enough. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, thanks for that. So, but we all know what it means to work hard, to do all the right things, to do all that you know to do all that you've been taught to do, and there are no results. When you are diligent, persistent, and consistent, doing all that it is in your power to get the expected results, only to be disappointed, let down, and discouraged. It's frustrating and at times devastating, right? You can feel like a complete failure, whatever it is, if it's being a parent, if it's working a particular job, starting a business, some endeavor, whatever it is. We've all been there. We work hard, do all the right things, do all that you're taught to do, still don't get the results that you're looking for. And that's exactly what was happening today in this gospel story, in today's gospel reading. Simon Peter, one of the more popular disciples, an expert fisherman, has just finished an exhausting night of fishing, right? Out there doing all that he was taught to do all night long and catching absolutely nothing. Putting out his nets, casting out nets, right? Doing it the right way. In those days, they had the big circular nets with the weights around, put it out, sinks to the bottom, come up, and you got your fish. He did all the things he was taught to do, catching absolutely nothing. until, of course, Jesus enters the scene. Jesus had been at that time using one of the boats near the shore to preach to large crowds. And so he would get on the boat, he'd push back a little bit, get out from the crowd. We have some distance between him and the crowd. He would stand up in the boat and preach. That's what he would do. And so he was doing that. And after he finishes preaching, he looks at Simon Peter and says, "Now, put out into the deep water, let your nets down, right, for a catch. Cast out your nets into the deep water, right? Let's get a catch." And so Peter, his first reflex was doubt. "What do you mean, Jesus, Master? Look, we've been working all night long, but have caught nothing. And besides, me and my partners over here, we are seasoned fishermen. We are the experts here. We know the best places and times to fish. We know these waters. There's nothing here to catch. There's nothing out there." But then Jesus, still in his persistence, he asks, he says, "Go put out into the water and let down the nets for a catch." And so despite his initial doubts, Simon Peter said something to Jesus that we all need to learn to say to God in our daily walk. Peter turns to Jesus and says, "Well, I don't agree with this, but because you say so, because you, God, says so, I will let down the nets," right? I will let down, so even though I'm the expert, even though I've been taught all the things to do, even though I know these waters like the back of my hand, right? Because you say so, I'll do it. And so then Peter pushes past his doubts and obeys Jesus. And then he gets some results that are overwhelming. They caught so many fish that the nets began to break, right? And he even has to call his partners over, the same partners who were also experts. He has to call them over, right? And so it was so many fish that the boats began to sink, right? This wasn't just a good catch. This was a miracle. And so there at that moment, Simon Peter experiences an epiphany. This Jesus, this one that's been going around Galilee teaching, healing, and preaching, this man is for real. There's something different about him. He's no ordinary Joe. He's something about this man. And so this story, though, is a wonderful metaphor for life with God, for all of us. Why? Because the truth is, again, sometimes we find ourselves frustrated after working hard at something, getting our hopes up, but seeing no results, right? Sometimes we even try to be positive in the process. What did Thomas Edison say? Thomas Edison said, he said, "I haven't failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work," right? So we try to stay positive. We cast our nets out into the deep in life, pouring our heart and soul into something, only to come up empty. Coming up empty-handed. Sometimes, though, it's not about how hard we work. It's really not about how hard we work. Sometimes it's more about allowing Christ in on that work that we're doing. To allow Jesus in, to have a say-so in the process, right? Allow Christ to enter the scene in your life. We may have the knowledge, we may have the gifts, the expertise, the experience, but God has the wisdom, the power, and the timing for everything. Everything in life I've found is about timing. Have you guys discovered that? Timing is everything. Timing. And God is the great orchestrator of time. You know, for a long time in my life, as I struggled of being a jazz musician and a priest, I've tried to figure out, how is that going to work? What is that? I don't see that, right? And so I tried to work hard, creating my own version of that. And I found myself circling the mountain until I allowed Jesus in. And then Christ led me to something called the Episcopal Church, who said, you can be all that you are. You can be, yes, a jazz musician, and you can be a priest, and it's going to work. And let me show you how that's going to work. To allow Christ in on what you're doing. Sometimes we're guilty of that in our expertise, doing it our way, right? Don't need any advice from God. I got it, right? But also, if you look at the story, something happens with Peter after all this happens. Peter, in his fear and shame, right? He just feels ashamed. He just said, oh my God, I didn't trust Jesus on this one. After he saw the wonderful results, he says, I'm sorry. And he begins to kind of beat himself up, right? And then Jesus doesn't beat him up, though. He beats himself up. And oftentimes when we fail, we beat ourselves up. As I heard one preacher said years ago, he said, nobody can beat us up like we beat us up, right? Nobody can be as cruel to us sometimes as we can be so cruel to ourselves. We beat ourselves up and we beat each other up. But thank God that God doesn't do us like we do each other and like we do ourselves, right? So Jesus says to him, he said, don't be afraid, Peter. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about the fact that you doubted me in the beginning, right? But the lesson is, Peter, that you did eventually invite me in. So don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people. I'm going to, what is he saying? I'm going to facilitate that expertise in fishing with some spiritual knowledge and power that will transform not only you, but transform people around you with the reality of Christ and his teachings. That's what I'm going to do, right? So that's really what it's all about. That's the journey in life. When we find that we're frustrated trying to do something over and over again, not getting the results, perhaps we need to pause and let God in. And with God's wisdom, power, and timing, it will all work out. And so I encourage each one of you in here today, no matter what stage of life you're in, we're all still pushing towards something. I say to you, put your nets out into the deep. Make a difference in your personal life, your community, and your church. But before you do, make sure that you consult with the one that can lead you to get some real results in life, Jesus the Christ. The only one with the wisdom, power, and timing to get you the results that not only that you're looking for, but more importantly, the results that God is looking for, right? And lead you into your true calling, right? So you can live this Christian life and walk this Christian walk that, although difficult at times, God always says, the same God that died on the cross for us, like a common criminal, God always says that even though it's difficult, through me, all things are possible. All things are possible. So launch out into the deep, cast your nets, but bring God into the fold before you do. Amen.